Welcome to Out of Left Field podcast, the socialist left-wing Canadian politics podcast where we enjoy a collection of drinks and rant about and discuss political stuff going on in the world and in this country in Canada. So welcome to our viewers. Just a heads up, we are finally on Twitter. After all of these years of doing this podcast and not following the basic rules of how you make a successful podcast, we have finally have a Twitter account. Our handle is @RealUlf, so that's @RealOOLF, not to be confused with @OOLF podcast, which is our, of course, by default, rival podcast that has the same name as us. They talk about baseball and shit, as you would expect, but don't confuse the two. It's @RealUlf. So, also, on that topic, we have a Patreon account, finally, so if any of you beloved listeners want to help us out with our hosting costs, or our professional SoundCloud page, or just want to help pay for our beer and wine, which, as everyone knows, is the lifeblood of our podcast, without which this would be a hollow, empty shell of itself.
It's the lifeblood of any good socialist.
Yes, of course, and I just want to give a shout-out to friend of the show, Donovan Moore, our first subscriber and donator on Patreon. Thank you very much for your support. We really appreciate it. In solidarity, we with your help and support, we will go up and beyond and seize the means of production and bring about revolution
and all that jazz
worldwide. So,
well, especially considering we hadn't actually told anyone it existed yet.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. So today is Labor Day. Happy Labor Day, Mac.
Happy Labor Day to you, Ben.
Happy Labor Day to all of you listeners and all of you comrades out there. So, fun fact, Labor Day actually is a fake holiday.
Well, aren't all holidays fake when you really think about it, Ben?
Okay, we're not going to bring you down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theory bullshit. What I'm saying is that Labor Day was actually made to sort of depoliticize and fuck over International Workers' Day, which of course is May 1st, right?
Yeah, sure.
The May 1st International Workers' Day was kind of, I guess, maybe a little bit too overtly communist for the ruling classes of countries like the United States and Canada, and so as a substitute, we have Labor Day in September here. So it's a fake holiday, and you should hate it, but you should also
So thank you for celebrating the fake bullshit holiday. Congratulations, you rubes.
But you should also enjoy the day off, and I hope that people had nice barbecues and drank lots of beer and enjoyed time with their families.
Labor Day, much like calling it soccer and an ambivalent attitude towards the metric system. It's one of the many sort of unique features of North American life that outsiders don't entirely understand.
So we're going to be spending today, this evening, as usual, drinking cheap wine and also discussing the state of the labor movement in North America and around the world, and some ways that we can maybe help improve that situation and what we can do to help make working people's lives better across the world.
So you said improving the labor movement and doing a lot of things, and there's a hell of a lot of work to do on that account.
Yeah, no shit.
It's no secret now that the labor movement in North America and arguably around the world is not only just weakened or weaker or gone through a historic period of defeats, but also still, politically at least, incredibly disorganized.
To say the least, not as influential as they used to be.
A generation, and in fact, I would say at this point, probably a majority of workers have not experienced a time period in which you could unequivocally say unions were strong.
Ever since the 1970s,
well, sure, but that's
wages have been stagnating.
But most people now, I mean, even if you were born in the 70s, that doesn't mean anything to anyone. By the time you are in the workforce, the unions are already like a shadow of their former selves. And even now, when Labor Day comes around and you see like the posts on Facebook or the speeches at a rally, quite often it's hearkening back to shit that happened in the 40s and 50s, or even earlier. Like, imagine that. You have a political or an economic movement of the working class that the best they can say is stuff that happened when no one there was alive. And getting out of that deep political hole is a monumental task, and arguably the single monumental task of the working class and the labor movement today.
I think it's really, I mean, I agree with you, but what a hostile environment to, like, just in the broadest, most general sense, for unions. I mean, we have the widespread casualization of labor. People are working multiple part-time jobs. You don't really have the environment, the material conditions that are really conducive to widespread union organizing, right? I mean, even just like trying to organize a fucking restaurant, for example. I mean, you have people that are being paid shit wages and that are overworked and tired and I can't think of a group of people more than restaurant workers that probably need a fucking union. But because of the high turnover rate, because of the casualization of all of it, it's really difficult to band everyone together and say, hey, we're forming a union.
Sure.
Right? So this is, I think, like, the main problem. This is the main obstacle in the strengthening the union movement and the labor movement generally, is that you just don't really have an environment that's easy to organize in.
Well, come on. I mean, I think that's giving the bureaucrats and idiots running our unions a little too much credit.
Okay, sure.
Because there was a time.
When has there ever been a good?
But there was a time when things were worse for organizing unions than they were now.
When people would actually get killed.
Yes, when you had the police showing up. If it would be like now if a bunch of restaurant workers wanted to organize and the special police showed up and started firing into crowds and beating people up. That doesn't happen anymore in Canada and North America, and a big part of that is because of the successes of the labor movement. That is a major gain that we've achieved and still have amongst a few that we can still hold on to. The fact of the matter is that a lot of these arguments about, workers are just more casualized, people don't work in the same place all the time. It was exactly that sort of environment in which unions originally thrived in North America. It was in logging camps, in mining camps, it was in, company towns where people could be kicked out of the job at any moment. It was exactly in an environment of quote-unquote precariat labor that unions became strong.
Yeah. Well, sure. I mean, because those are the types of work that need the most help.
Sure, and we have that now.
I mean, I get what you're saying. Saying that, it's just too difficult to organize in is like a shitty excuse that decrepit, gray-haired bureaucrat.
It is difficult to organize, and it's very difficult to organize when you've got nothing really to offer people.
Well, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, okay, let's be honest here. The labor movement is in a bit of a funk, to put it mildly.
Yeah, no shit.
The average worker in North America is never going to, at least if nothing changes, is never going to experience a union in their life. They're going to go from crappy job to crappy job to crappy job until maybe they find a decent enough job that's stable that they just stick with until it goes away. Ideally, a decent enough crappy job that they can have a family and a stable life. But unions never really enter into that equation for most people.
Yeah, that's true.
The fact that there are still union jobs and the fact that the union still exists as a strong political force is great. And I think that, the working class as a whole does benefit from both the existence of unions as sort of a basic threat to capitalism and also on the basis of their own demands, push up the overall average wages and working conditions of workers everywhere. But if you're talking to somebody on the job and they ask, we could form a union at our restaurant, for instance. We could go to all the massive amount of trouble of organizing, signing people up, doing votes, getting harassed by the boss for weeks and weeks and weeks, and possibly at the end of it, we get organized. And what do we get out of that? Are our wages going to be dramatically better? Are we actually going to achieve a fundamentally better standard of living? Because while unions can say that, yes, the average union wage is higher than the average non-union wage, the fact of the matter is that too often unions have just sort of left new union locals sort of adrift on these issues. So quite often you'll have a massive union drive, and then a deunionization campaign will just destroy all that hard work, and then the leaders of that union local will get blacklisted, and that'll be the end of it.
Well, before we get too deep into this, because it's Labor Day, I do want to just acknowledge some fairly kick-ass things that unions have fought and died for over the years and generations. You like weekends? You like having Saturday and Sunday off? You can thank your unions for that. You like maternity leave, paternity leave? Also unions. Paid time off, sick days? Also unions. And so on. and so on.
Oh yeah,
I think that
unemployment insurance, basically any kind of safety rights,
workers' compensation, employment insurance.
Yeah.
So I mean, the worst situation for any working person is this race to the bottom, where I'll work for cheaper, and then unions provide a sort of benchmark of this is what people should be paid. These are the rights and the benefits that any person should get, and the more people that are in a union, the stronger that case is.
I don't want to say it's not a good idea to unionize or a good idea to support unions when and where that's possible. But, I mean, I think it is important to have a sense of perspective. And this is more of advice to people who support unions even, but have a sense of perspective on why a lot of people just don't see it as an option, because they've never experienced it as a realistic option in their lifetime at all. They've not seen what I think unions can do and can be. And when it comes to that whole bureaucratic, those myopic assholes, anti-progress weirdos who just follow everything to the letter and so on. You have a 15-minute break that you have to take and blah blah blah. The reason for all that kind of bullshit of taking the break when you're supposed to and safety regulations that have to be followed to the letter is for two reasons. One is that is oftentimes a fundamental part of a contract, which means that both parties are obliged to follow those rules of a labor contract. The workers and the employer, which means that if there's a period of time when the member of the union is supposed to be on a break, they have to be on a break, even if they don't want to be necessarily. And the second part is those standards exist because bosses will fuck people over at every opportunity if they don't. While we might say that, hey, isn't it really inconvenient that you're taking a break at an inconvenient time, or these safety regulations, aren't they kind of unnecessary in this particular instance? The fact is they have to be clear-cut standards, because otherwise the boss will get people to do shit that is unsafe, or they will start cutting into people's free time or time off during work, which I'm sure, most people have experienced, where you're thinking to yourself, I was told I had 15 minutes, but 12 minutes into it, they, told me to go out because there's a bunch of people on the floor who want to buy shit.
Right.
And of course, the manager's going to say, yeah, come on, it's 3 minutes. What are you, some kind of asshole?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That kind of crap. And you're right? They can get away with that shit when you don't have an actual contract mandating what the standards actually are.
I think you bring up a really good point there, but I think that this is one of the things that makes the labor movement struggle kind of difficult in an era of sort of contract and precarious and part-time and casual work, right?
Yeah.
Because, sometimes you can't just take your fucking 15 minutes at this point in the day, and I think that unions, as the sort of bureaucratic institutions as they are today, can't really, in the form that they exist in now, adapt to the new labor market. And I think that unions probably should be a little bit more flexible and a little bit more open to new ideas. Otherwise, it's not going to be possible to, organize anywhere.
Sure. I mean, it's a 24-hour economy, right?
Well, sure. Yeah, you can't just do 9 to 5 anymore.
Yeah, there is no 9 to 5 anymore. And maybe there never was, but there definitely isn't now.
Yeah.
But I get your point. I do suspect, and that's probably because I'm such a massive pessimist, but I do suspect that the reason why they've had a hard time adapting to the new labor market is because to be honest, I think a lot of unions and a lot of union bureaucrats have simply, they're done. They've figured it out. They've got a stable membership for the most part, and that's it.
There's a total loss of the sense of class struggle.
Well, there's a loss of class struggle, but there's also even, ignoring for a minute, like us being revolutionary socialists and us wanting to see the end of capitalism forever and always. Just the idea of union density seems to be a notion. Increasing union density seems to be a notion that has been pretty much ignored.
What do you mean density?
Well, I mean, if you listen to any speeches by the BC Fed or the CLC or anyone else in the country, a lot of it is about how declining union density has taken place over the last few decades, which means, per person in a region, in a province, the percentage of people who are in unions has gone down, right, basically. And they want to reverse that. And good for them to want to reverse that, except time and again, they have not really addressed the basic problems of how to reverse that. and who's made a mistake. I mean, we've seen in the case of the BC Fed here in British Columbia, we've seen union presidents who have basically presided over the biggest loss in union membership in the history of the BC Fed being given like lifetime achievement awards for their hard work. Instead of being pounded into the ground as the greatest failures of our generation, a lot of these people are being lauded as just hard workers and solid trade unionists.
They put in their time.
Yeah,
they
they're
deserve an award.
he did this or they did that or whatever, and it's just left there. And the crisis that they're willing to admit exists is still left utterly unrecognized as a problem within their own leadership.
Well, I mean, like fucking Trotsky said at the very beginning of the transitional program, the world political situation as a whole is chiefly characterized by a historical crisis of the leadership of the proletariat. We see that the union leadership in countries like the United States and Canada, the sort of crusty upper crust of the bureaucracy that have been there for decades, is totally fucking unconnected in every way to the struggles and the concerns and the daily realities of the people on the ground, the service sector employees that don't have benefits, the people that don't get paid leave, that don't get sick leave, that don't get fucking sick days, for Christ's sake. I mean, the union bureaucrats are like the last people I would look to for leadership to help these people.
Sure, it's a bit of a headless movement for the most part.
And that's the one thing that the union movement needs to fix in order to adapt itself to the new realities that we're facing. And, what is the answer to, well, how do you improve the lives and organize people that are, say, working for Uber or working multiple part-time jobs? I don't really fucking know. But that's a question that needs to be asked. It's a question that needs to be debated. And it's a question that requires an answer in order for the labor movement to continue to fucking exist in the decades to come.
Sure. We're both radical so-and-sos, and as such, our remedies to any problem will be revolution.
Socialism. I have a headache this morning. I'm not feeling well. Well,
Stub my toe.
You need some socialism.
If socialism was real, this would not have happened.
I had a bad day, and my boss at work made me feel stressed. Oh, well, once we seize the means, then that will just go away.
It is a
refrain.
It is an insultingly accurate stereotype of many socialists that is often just all we have to say about this question.
My math test was too hard.
Socialism. Done.
Nationalize it.
Yeah. No, what I would appeal to, in all seriousness, isn't, to say socialism's great, although I'll say that any day of the week. That's whatever. That's how I wake up in the morning.
Yeah, fucking right. Cheers to that.
But realistically, it's a question of rank-and-file democracy in unions. If the membership of a union isn't convinced of socialism or anything else, that's fine, but they need to be in control of their own union in a direct and appreciable way. And if that means making mistakes or going on strike when they shouldn't, or signing the wrong sorts of deals when they could have gotten something better, I think that the experience that comes from being actually in control of your own union, for better and worse, will train up the people in that union to be the leadership that's needed. My real criticism of the bureaucrats running these unions isn't that they're too right-wing, because there's plenty of left-wing bureaucrats who've risen up in the last few years in the Canadian labor movement, who have sort of presented themselves as, the solution to this problem. We'll just have left-wing bureaucrats, and we'll have left-wing decisions being made in your name. But no, I think that the membership needs to be making those choices in a way that may probably result, at least in the short term, in a series of real defeats. But I think that's the only foundation on which a serious labor movement that is representing the working class in Canada can even exist. The days of having a union president who's acclaimed instead of elected, where the union members all just go to their job 9 to 5, 5 days a week until they retire, and then are in the retirement fund, and that's it. That doesn't exist anymore. That stable world of consistent union dues coming in and consistent union vice presidents being paid out just can't happen anymore.
Yeah.
And the only remedy I can see is democracy. It's not to say that, every union should become revolutionary right now. I think that should happen, but it does no good for us to demand it on the basis of some kind of bureaucratic turn ourselves. If only we were in charge of the union movement or the labor movement, then we would show those fucking stupid workers what to do. That is just as bad as the right wingers who basically say the same thing. Workers are just, they don't know what's good for them. That attitude is what needs to be eradicated.
Yeah, there needs to be more democracy.
Yeah.
I mean, who in any context would argue against that?
Who indeed would argue against more democracy or the election of a new executive or, well, what have you? Who indeed would argue against such an obviously easy to justify thing? Surely no one would argue against that.
Well,
you've never been in a union, have you?
Well, I mean, Jesus, I mean, the fucking ABCs of the whole labor movement and why it exists is like, well, you find vulnerable workers, you organize them, and you protect them, and you fight for something better. And the unions can't even, like, let alone get ABC right. They can't get fucking A right. They're just in this fucking upper crust, and they have their cushy jobs, and they just want things to continue to be the same. But it's not the same, and things are changing, and shit is fucked up right now, and there needs to be a more radical position. Unions do need to adapt, and I agree with you 1,000% that the key to this is democracy within unions themselves and labor organizations, and just the willingness to adapt to the new economic landscape that we have been presented with.
Sure.
Right? That is the only way with which that the labor movement can continue to grow and can continue to protect people. Otherwise, we're just going to have fucking corporations like Uber who can eat my ass, just run roughshod over working people left, right, and center.
Come on, I wouldn't worry about Uber too much. They're going to be bankrupt pretty soon.
They're going to go bankrupt soon.
I mean,
every single ride they give, they lose money on. So
use Uber is what our suggestion is. Uber's very business model hurts Uber, so use Uber as much as possible. Because Uber will die sooner the more Uber is used.
I don't even fucking get me started.
Oh no, you know what? You're right.
That's
ridiculous. I'm not an accelerationist. Okay, Uber will die on its own terms.
Slow, inexorable death.
Yeah.
So, I think that we should turn our attention over to the fight for 15. Okay.
Yeah.
This is the
big
best
movement.
This is the best fucking movement that there is. You know.
International, and by international, of course, when we're talking about Labor Day, I mean Canada and the U.S.
And the United States.
But come on, I mean, that's one of the things we should actually be proud of in the Canadian labor movement is how much we have ignored the international boundaries between our two countries. Because
what do you mean?
Well, a lot of our unions and a lot of our union movements are cross-border, and we've done a very good job, I think, of ignoring what is ultimately an arbitrary line on a map. Because, the struggle of workers in Canada is the same as the struggle of workers in the United States, and we have been able to reflect that in North America better than a lot of other places.
With the fight for 15.
With the fight for 15, but also just generally the labor movement, the history of the labor movement in North America.
Well, yeah, we have unions that are like cross-border and shit, so.
Yeah, which is great. And we spend a lot of time ragging on the unions, but that's one of those things that I am quite, proud of, happy of, I think is a good thing.
Yeah. Well, for sure. I mean, capital is international, and so
we should be.
We also too should be international. And if you had like a Canadian workers going on strike, they just moved to America, and if you had Americans going on strike, they just moved to Canada. But if you're both fucking unionized, then fuck all y'all. We're all going on strike. So. That's the good thing. And
that's what's been so good about the Fight for 15 struggle is that it has had successes on both sides of the border.
Yeah, and most spectacularly in Seattle, where they've actually implemented it or are implementing it, and you don't see the kind of doom and gloom, awful. Everyone's going to be unemployed.
Post-apocalyptic
it's going to
hellscape.
Be fucking Fallout New Vegas, and everyone's going to be in the wasteland and with no job, no clean water because the workers wanted
because they got a couple dollars more an hour.
Yeah, and that was all it took.
That was all it took. Man, what a
And then the bombs started dropping.
It says a lot about the state of capitalism that it's even plausible that the entire economy could be just shit canned by a small increase in the minimum wage. Like, what kind of fucking fragile porcelain-like situation are we looking at? Where even but not even telling people we're going to raise the minimum wage so it's above the poverty line. No. Poverty is still going to be a systemic problem integrated into the economy as well as anything else.
Capitalism can't survive without it.
Capitalism can't survive without poverty. That's as good a reason to get rid of it as anything. But to tell people that, we could raise the minimum wage from 12 to 15, but the economy would fall apart.
The gods of the economy would not look favorably upon...
I don't think they're right, but even if they are, that's just not really...
I don't want to hear a fucking apologist for the capitalist system say, you know what, sure, raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. The capitalist system is so robust and so strong that it can take anything that you throw at it.
Our profits are so massive, it's such an efficient way of growing the economy that you could do whatever you want.
Fuck, make it $21 an hour. Yeah. We can take it. We're so good that it doesn't even matter. I don't hear one motherfucker on the right wing saying anything fucking remotely like that. And is that not itself an indictment against capitalism that they can't even fucking accept a, increase in the fucking minimum wage? You have people working multiple jobs. Jesus.
Yeah.
Is the argument in favor of any economic system that it can deliver the goods, that, capitalism is so great because people can survive and can have good lives. Well, no, as it turns out, they need not one, but not two, but, sometimes three jobs.
As many
to make
jobs
ends
as
meet.
It takes to survive.
To prove that capitalism works.
And don't forget, a lot of people are still going to be unemployed anyway, so,
Because you need that, reserve system of labor.
Yeah. You need a certain number of people to be unemployed. You need a certain number of people to be impoverished. You need a certain number of people...
To serve as an example as to what happens when you fall out of line.
And eventually you start cutting those wedges out of society, and I'm not sure what you end up left with. I suppose that's what's called the middle class, I guess. Whatever's left over. So the middle class are those bastards who are ruining the capitalist economy, I suppose.
By having too high of a standard of living.
Yeah.
So here in British Columbia, we have a new NDP government. Motherfucker, yeah! And
motherfucker,
So one of the campaign promises for the NDP was that we were going to have a $15 an hour minimum wage by 2021.
What I'm going to do is raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour by the end of my first term in government. Right now, we're amongst the lowest minimum wages in the country, in the most unaffordable place in Canada.
2021.
Which is a fuck time long from now. Already.
Well, I mean, a living wage in the city is like $20 an hour, around there, and so we're kind of just like, we're underballing it by having it at 15 anyway. But I guess what happened was that the BC NDP were, on board with this $15 an hour minimum wage until the Green Party came in.
Well, come on. We all know that that's what happened, but we don't actually know for a fact that that's what happened.
Okay, but from at least judging it how it happened, Andrew Weaver and the Greens said that oh no, we have this study going on to determine what is the best time frame to implement the $15 an hour minimum wage, and maybe 2021 is too soon, so let's just defer to that.
4 years from now is too soon?
Like at the end of your fucking term?
Well, slightly afterwards. Hey, if you vote him in twice, again, perhaps we'll do it.
But this is, okay, the allegiances of the Green Party...
We've already
is a whole other conversation.
We've gone into this before,
and I'm sure we'll touch on it again. But the BC NDP relies on the 3 MLAs from the Green Party to stay afloat, and so they kind of deferred to their judgment,
kind of,
and so we're kind of abandoning one of the key campaign promises that the NDP had.
Kind of. They also. The NDP didn't say that it was the Green Party that said no, which means essentially the NDP's taking it all on themselves to make this decision.
I think they're just hand-waving and hoping that nobody laid the blame
we'll do it
on
some
anyone.
Other time. And so now, the $15 an hour minimum wage, which is going to be implemented in Alberta before BC and in Ontario before BC, Alberta particularly is pretty absurd because the economy there is quite bad.
And it's Alberta.
And, well, they have still an NDP government, and I assume they want to get the $15 minimum wage in before they get kicked out by the United Conservative Party at some point.
Yeah.
And the Liberal Party in Ontario has implemented it with a lot of pressure because Kathleen Wynne's approval rating was worse than pretty much anything.
Cancer?
Almost. In fact, I think there was an article in the news that compared her approval rating to other really low things, like, would you like to have Trump be Prime Minister of Canada? And people would prefer that to her being Premier of Ontario. You know,
that was like the poll that they took of people in the United States around Trump being elected. Like, would you rather a meteor crash into Earth? And
it's kind of like that. And so,
killed?
I mean, but to be fair, that is sort of the situation most of the premiers are in most of the time anyway. Single-digit support levels.
John Horgan is still in his honeymoon phase, so let's see how long that lasts.
Well, for me at least, it lasted until they said they weren't going to do a $15 minimum wage.
I was just going to say the same thing. Actually, you took the words right out of my mouth. Fucking, they could have just said, hey, we're going to implement $15 an hour minimum wage like next year, and I would say, great, you guys are fucking awesome.
Fine,
but
whatever.
I think that
I thought 2021 was bullshit.
And you know, Jesus, I mean the approval ratings and the even relevance of left-wing leaders, whether it's in BC or anywhere else, I think is directly proportional to their willingness to use their political capital to put through things like $15 minimum wage. And if they just kick the can down the road and say, oh, it's too hard, and
we'll figure it out later,
then why the fuck don't they just vote for the Liberals?
Well, also, I mean, I can understand why they wouldn't be able to implement it. If the Greens do not want to vote for a $15 minimum wage, that legislation won't actually be passed. But then just fucking put it into the legislature anyway.
Yeah.
Show them. Show everyone. What side is your bread buttered on, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
make it a matter of fucking written parliament
do you
record.
Support an increase in the minimum wage? Do you support making it easier for unions to unionize in this province?
Oh, no? Well,
no,
I would like to
great. Well, how about that?
Well, why don't you tell us more about why you hate working people, Andrew Weaver? Tell us more about how you don't think people should be paid a living wage.
That business and job creators and all that other bullshit.
Exactly. So we have, there's a really awesome clip here that I want to show you all, and this is a worker in the United States in the South advocating and organizing for a $15 an hour minimum wage. And so I know he's an American and we're in Canada, but whatever, this is all the same struggle, and I think that this guy puts it so fucking succinctly and beautifully that I want you all to enjoy.
I've not got any degree whatsoever. I'm just damn white trash hillbilly from the holler. You know, I don't need a damn degree for my words to mean something. I come from coal country. My grandfather was a coal miner. Actually, all my grandfathers and most of my great-grandfathers were coal miners. You know, my great-uncles, cousins of mine were all coal miners. Coal industry's been dying for a long time, you know, through mechanization labor and, you know, through good things like, more affordable green energy. But another thing that's really been causing death of it is natural gas, you know, hydraulic fracturing. Ain't no damn immigrant stole a coal job. I'll tell you that right now. You know, and really, even if they did, would you really be blaming the immigrants or the people that hired them? The people that are, because the only reason they would hire an immigrant over an American citizen is if it benefits their wallets. You know, these people that, you know, they're not paying payroll tax on, these people that they're paying below minimum wage, things like that. Really, you know, can you really put the blame on the immigrants in the first place, you know? You know, Dickinson County, Virginia has, you know, over 25% poverty rate. Average incomes are under $20,000 a year. You know, people are reliant on all kinds of public assistance, and the schools are failing. They're consolidating. Schools are shutting down, and we need $15. We need a union. The only thing that these companies care about is the dollar. They don't care about us. They have never cared about us workers, not once. The only way that we get what we want is we resist hard enough that it's better for their interest to work with us than keep working against us.
I fucking love that guy, and even though that, we're in Canada and he's in the United States, the struggle of working class people is international. And I think that the issues that people like him are facing are exactly the same kinds of things that workers in Canada are facing. Especially in Ontario, you have like a shitload of manufacturing jobs that have been hollowed out, and you have the replacement of these full-time union jobs with precarious work and shitty service sector jobs. So I think that this guy, and I just love how frank he is and how to the point he is about it.
Yeah, I think he's great. But more than that, I'd say that, to any union bureaucrat out there are just millions of people like him who think exactly the same way he does. Like these ideas, these arguments aren't necessarily all that rare. They're not necessarily going to be expressed quite so frankly. But,
or aired on the news.
Yeah, on the news or whatever. But plenty of people think this kind of shit. Plenty of working class people think this and are fucking completely aware of the situation as it actually is. And it's really a testament to the general, I guess, just lack of faith that a lot of labor leaders have
in regular people, in
the working class, where they just go, well, that fucking state, that province, that region, that town, whatever it is, it's just a fucking write-off, bunch of rednecks, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but rednecks are the fucking lifeblood of the union movement.
The poor and ignorant are exactly the kind of people who understand what's going on.
Well, what a paradox.
That's the fucking problem. And it's like, well...
Because the people that are most affected by the crisis of capitalism are the people that have the least benefits from that very system.
Yeah.
I mean, here in Canada, we've had a number of people calling on Justin Trudeau to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. And the minimum wage in Canada is determined by the provinces, right? And so each and every different province has...
It's the same thing as the states.
Yeah, but in Canada, the federal government cannot legislate the provinces to have a minimum wage at a certain level. But what they can do is make sure that all federal employees... Sure. And people that work at banks and I think one other sector of the economy
banks,
have at least X number of dollars per hour. And Justin Trudeau, our super progressive prime minister, is very averse to doing that. Let me show you a clip about how averse he is to doing that.
Let me listen to you a clip.
Wouldn't it be a good idea to raise the minimum wage?
That's always a possibility. It's not something that the federal government can do directly. We only have power over banks and telcos. A number of provinces are looking at raising the minimum wage across the board. There's always a question of whether or not that has the impact that everyone would like to have. Maybe everything just gets more expensive, or we have jobs leaving. We have to be very careful about that. But I know that making sure that people have a possibility of making enough wages to be able to live and succeed is something that Canada's always done. And there are no easy solutions, but we're working very hard to try and create the growth and the opportunities for you and for future generations that make a difference.
Trudeau also said in another interview that his government didn't see raising the federal minimum wage as the ideal solution to help those who face various economic barriers. There is no magic bullet, Trudeau said. We have to work across many jurisdictions and across many different challenges in order to drop one by one all the various barriers that too many Canadians face to succeeding. So basically, Canadian workers do face challenges, but giving them enough money to live is not a solution to that problem.
Yeah, I like the idea that, it's a fundamental principle of Canada that, we make sure people have the possibility to have wages to live. That's a fucking pretty low bar, isn't it? Well, who knows? I mean, the $15 an hour thing,
That is such a fucking liberal thing to say. Not even that a fundamental principle of Canada is that people have enough money to live. That it's just the possibility of maybe having that is a fundamental principle.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like a fucking principle at all. That just sounds like liberal fucking hogwash to me.
Yeah, well, I also noticed whenever Justin Trudeau starts a sentence with always, it's going to be complete bullshit.
It means lots of asterisks and maybe maybe,
we
and
always
sometimes
believe in, or
but
always striving for. But gotta remember that the idea of survival is it's nuanced. Okay, some people are just gonna have to die.
the thing that I love
I
about
guess.
Canada, the thing I love most about Canada is that maybe we can all live.
Maybe.
We can
And what's
maybe have
worse
the possibility
is that in
of
that whole
living.
thing, it's about what do we do next. And so it's not even like we're already at the point where we can ensure that people have the possibility to live. It's we're striving towards a future time when that possibility will be available for everyone.
Liberalism.jpg.
What does that even mean?
You know, I love the expression of on the face of the guy that was interviewing Trudeau, and like he starts off with a pretty straightforward question, like,
Yeah.
do you think it's
What's
maybe
about $15?
Do you think it's a good idea that maybe we could raise the minimum wage? And Trudeau starts his fucking nonsensical, shitty liberal answer, and as the camera pans back to the reporter is looking increasingly like, what are you saying? So I guess the point that we're trying to make here is that the Liberal Party and liberalism in general is fucking bankrupt and has no plausible, palatable answer to this question because it's failed. So liberalism has failed and capitalism has failed and the only answer is radical union organizing and socialism, and fuck all y'all that disagree because that's the fucking truth. And that's mic drop.
Yeah,
I'm done.
well, I mean,
I'll be
you
on-
got like several decades of bullshit as evidence at this point. It's not like the unions have got any sort of strategic successes to point to. No. You know, our reformist attitudes have won us these major gains over here, you see. We've gotten... I mean, when was the last time we got thousands of automobile jobs, you know, on the basis of reformism or anything else? Or any of that kind of stuff. Like
one incremental step to maybe a better tomorrow.
Well, they were going to get rid of 800 jobs, but we negotiated them down to 600. So that means we won 200 jobs.
Oh, I'm laughing, but it's so fucking depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus. And the thing about Justin Trudeau being opposed to this federal minimum wage increase, it's like, this only applies to people that work for the federal government. Who the fuck is working for the federal government and is not making $15 an hour?
Quite actually, a fair number of people, to be honest.
What are they, like the cleaning staff or what?
Statisticians, a few other people who do clerical work. There is actually a decent number of people that would be improved by the raising of the federal minimum wage. The funny thing, of course, is that none of that has to do, for the most part, with any kind of private industry. It's not like by raising the federal minimum wage, he's obligating any sort of private business.
Or his campaign donors.
Well, sure. I think the reason he doesn't really want to raise the minimum wage is just because it would be a bad or good example for provinces and everyone else. And
that's exactly why he doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, because, people would be like, oh, cool,
you don't
want to
rock the boat too much. I mean, giving people enough money to live on is kind of radical. I mean...
at these days, apparently it is. I mean, you have to be some kind of, like, revolutionary socialist
communist,
to demand a living wage or, full employment or any number of fairly mundane things.
Yeah. Okay, so I kind of want to spitball here and put an idea forward that I think is a good one. One thing that I think could be a really successful way to organize people going forward in this context is tenants unions. Not everybody works in a workplace that is, conducive to unionizing, but most working people rent. Most people pay most of their, 50% or more of their paycheck to some fucking vampiric, blood-sucking property management company. Out of their paycheck, they pay like a massive chunk to rent.
Yeah.
And that is one thing that most working people experience on a month-to-month, day-to-day basis. There's a tenants union in Vancouver, and there's a tenants union in Toronto, and this is one thing, like, I think that this could maybe be the next big thing in terms of organizing working people, because we're paying a massive chunk out of our paycheck to just fucking live somewhere, and it's too expensive for pretty much everyone, and the property rental companies will charge whatever they possibly can, whatever people are willing to pay out of their paycheck just to have a place to live. And we see people in Vancouver and Toronto banding together and giving each other legal assistance, giving each other, and even sometimes going on rent strikes to protest rent evictions, people being evicted from their homes so the landlords can, do a couple of fucking renovations and charge more for rent. The fact of the matter is that housing is a fucking human right. This is not negotiable. So I love to see people banding together and reinforcing this and sticking it to the landlords. If you want to raise, everybody's rent by $100, if you want to evict people from our homes just so you can raise the rent and rent it to somebody else, fuck you. We're stronger together, and I think that personally, it's the key to organizing the working class. Yes.
Yeah.
Going forward, how do you organize people that can't be organized? You find the one thing that binds them all together.
Well,
they all rent from the same shitty fucking property management companies.
That's what good trade unionists are supposed to be doing, is you say exactly that kind of question, How do you organize people who can't be organized? How do you get to people that you can't yet get to?
You find the one thing they have in common.
Where do they go? What's the thing they have in common? What's the issue that's the big, issue? What matters to them? And yeah, I think tenants unions are going to be great, to be honest. And let's face it, the tenants union in Toronto actually got a really big win a few weeks ago.
Oh shit! Did they?
Yeah, but my point, I guess, isn't so much that they won, but that their win was actually national news, and I can't remember the last time that was a fact with a union. Where a union won in such a way that it was so miraculous and so amazing that it was just in the news. I
don't think there's been a story like that in our lifetime.
I don't remember anything like that. I can't think of it, honestly.
The last time I remember like a major union organization being in the news was like the HEU strike.
Yeah.
Where the union leadership negotiated a 15% wage cut to the health workers.
That's the kind of stuff that ends up in the news. And is it any wonder on the basis of that people look to the labor movement and kind of go, it's dying, or it's a dinosaur, or it doesn't matter, or it certainly wouldn't do me any good to be a member of a union. But you can look to tenants unions, and within a matter of just basically being organized and throwing themselves into a struggle, they managed to get major concessions and win major gains. There's nothing necessarily surprising about this. I mean, it is basically just the usual idea of a strike, of solidarity, of working together, of making sure that everybody's on the same page, and organizing, individual by individual, door by door, whatever it takes. You get people out there, and the fact of the matter was, in that tenants union in Toronto, there is actually a motivation to do that. There is a motivation in that tenants union that doesn't exist in any union in this country, and that's to get get your neighbors involved, to get everybody involved. This is good for you, it's good for me, it's good for everyone.
That's the whole fucking point of a union.
Well, sure, but when is the last time a union's actually done that? When was the last time a union knocked on your door,
Never in my lifetime.
Yeah. Well,
and that's what's so awesome about the tenants unions, is that it doesn't matter if you work in a precarious work environment, it doesn't matter if you have 3 jobs, you're still renting from the same fucking piece of shit property management company that will charge you an arm and a leg just to live in a fucking indoors somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think this is, and everybody listening to this podcast, if you live in an apartment, if you live in a condo, if you live in a fucking house, if you live indoors,
there's a reason to be a member of a tenants union.
Exactly.
So we started this with talking about Labor Day and the state of the labor movement, and a lot of what we've had to say has been, negative. Curmudgeonly, pessimistic, kind of unpleasant, at the best of times. But I think we've given the labor movement its due, and Christ, there's no way we could in an hour or even a day, 24 hours, list off the gains made by organized labor.
Yeah, fucking right.
It is tough to overestimate just how important it's been in the very existence of our lives here and now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
go on.
That doesn't mean we can't be,
critical as fuck.
Yeah.
We're talking about our lives.
Yeah, we're talking about our lives, and we're talking about the way the world is now. And like I said, a little while ago, it's one thing to talk about the world 70 years ago and talk about the gains achieved and the 8-hour day and the WCB and all these other sorts of things. But the fact of the matter is that unions today have experienced a kind of a strategic defeat that they have yet to really reckon with in any way at all. They've lost numbers, they've lost wages, they've lost influence, yeah. And that is still just not being dealt with at all. It's sort of referenced occasionally, but realistically, as far as I can tell, it's sort of a hand-wringing, lamentable state of affairs, but no union seems to be taking it on head on.
Well, for sure, but I think that you can... I don't want to lodge this criticism just at unions. I mean, I think you can say the same thing about liberals and basically anybody else that just wants the status quo to just keep on working. Because we're in a time where capitalism is in crisis, society is in crisis, and there's all sorts of fucking shit going on. And we just, for the most part, especially the organizations like unions and status quo political parties, just want things to keep being the same. Like, maybe this is just going to be a temporary problem and we can weather the storm, and when it's all done, we can just keep doing the same fucking thing and it'll just work out.
Just run elections and keep bringing in dues and having conventions and...
Well, exactly, and that's why I think that the labor movement in general, in Canada, in the United States, in North America, and around the world, needs to wake up to the realities of the fucking bullshittery chaos which is modern global capitalism. And unless the labor movement does that, then they will be discarded into fucking irrelevancy. And I look forward to a brand new, invigorated, youthful labor movement that will rise out of the ashes of this fucking calcified bureaucracy that exists. And that I do believe that the young people of today can really take hold of this and move everything forward.
Yeah, really, the best and worst thing I could say on Labor Day is that the working class, even now, represents the most powerful force in opposition to capitalism in the world today. And that's terrifying considering how disorganized it is, but also heartening because the working class is not the unions, it's not the bureaucrats, it's not this or that union local, or this or that acronym that we, give our dues to. The working class's power comes from its very just sort of foundation in society as people who are paid to work to make money for someone else, right? That's it. That's both, there is arguably no one in history more exploited, but also no class in history more powerful than the working class. And because of that, there is so much power there, that like unrealized power in the labor movement, that I see the people who run it now as kind of just in the way. And I don't see it as a dinosaur. I don't see it as sort of an ossified artifact from a previous era. Because if that was the case, the unions could just go away and we would just live in a world of, casualized Uber-esque labor and nothing would ever change. But I think that if those people got out of the way, or if they are replaced by better people in the movement, in the labor movement, that power, when it's unleashed, is honestly amazing. Nothing can stand up to the working class when it's organized. So on Labor Day and on May Day, whatever day we want to pick in the year, that we actually decide to celebrate this fact. The fact of the matter is that the working class is not just another segment of society that deserves a holiday. It's the power behind every single thing that happens in society. No wheel turns, no light is on without the working class. That's a basic sort of tenet of the labor movement. But it is in fact true. Anything that happens because the working class lets it happen. And if it lets it happen because we're disorganized and we don't really know what we're doing, then that's a damn shame, but, the power's still ours.
So to all of our listeners and to working people across the globe, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. And maybe by that next time we'll have a theme song. That remains to be seen.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong.